It looks like George Clooney is courting the streamers after The Midnight Sky with Netflix, which is in post and looking for a play date possibly this year, most likely next year. George Clooney is looking to possibly partner with Amazon for a book to film adaptation of the Tender Bar. Welcome to another edition of IndieSponge, folks. I'm Eric Lavallée, and this is Kevin Jagernauth. Kevin, another Smokehouse Pictures production. This one is also including Ted Hope, who was with Amazon and now is commencing a second producing career, I guess. What do you think about this project?
It's an interesting one. It is a bit of a new direction for George Clooney as a director. His films to date have tended to be either a bit topical or touch on major moments in history, such as Monuments Men or Ides of March and Good Night and Good Luck. But he seems to be trying a few new things. He had Suburbicon a couple years ago, which were in a sort of a black comedy kind of vibe. Midnight Sky is a post-apocalyptic tale, and now he's doing something, a coming-of-age story, essentially, with the Tender Bar. So that's pretty interesting. It's a different avenue for him, and for me, the other interesting thing for this is the screenwriter. William Monahan will be writing it. And for him, it seems like a bit of a departure as well. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, looking further into this project, I see that the majority of it takes place in a neighborhood bar. So automatically, I thought about some of the more infamous scenes between Jack Nicholson and Leo DiCaprio in that bar setting. And so there's a vague familiarity there in terms of what a local drinking hole can do for select characters. I didn't do any further connecting the dots between this project and the scribe, but digging down into the author, there's a lot of colorful stories with regards to, and I'm going to screw up his name here, but his name is Mo Ringer, who essentially, this is his story. And since publishing this book, he's gone on to work on other written pieces that have also been adapted. Specifically, I'm forgetting the title now. I think it was The Resurrection of the Champ, I believe. But I feel as if there might be a cool Scorsese-esque, perhaps, approach to this material, told in two coming of age, or told in like two different two different eras, and so it does touch upon a lot of. I think Clooney is obsessed with certain qualities of the yesteryear. I mean, his recent Hulu series Catch 22 certainly adheres to that idea. But I like the idea of like sort of like smelly bar with a whole bunch of characters and how they inform this young protagonist who essentially knew his father through being a radio voice. I think there's some cool elements here that in a filmography that's almost 2 decades old, Clooney hasn't really touched upon. I think it's rather neat.
Yeah, I think we're both zeroing on the fact that this is a new avenue for Clooney. A young boy wants to find his father, who he never really knew. And you're right, the bar setting. Clooney is also known for having a lot of colorful characters in his films, and certainly this sort of setting of this young boy, sort of being taken in by the locals at this bar as he tries to find his father, is a lot of opportunity to have those kinds of offbeat, unique characters that that Clooney likes to have in his films.
Hmm. I'm just looking up a name. Who's the actor in Confessions of a Dangerous Mind who won?
Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, I could see a Sam Rockwell be part of the fabric of these characters. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting coming of ager. And so, yeah, so the Amazon deal isn't set in stone yet, but it certainly signifies that that project could be put into place sometime this year. So we can look for some casting news, specifically for a preteen boy, and I think a lot of the supporting brotherhood or fatherhood or parenthood characters. In the news sphere for since 2017, and it's been jetsoned into production finally, with a filmmaker that was originally attached as producer but is moving into the director's chair. So Netflix is getting behind and supporting O2, by Alexandre Aja. One of the things I want to discuss with you is how you feel about the filmmaker and his career so far. But yeah, a project that was originally set to star Anne Hathaway and based on a blacklist screenplay by a Quebecois writer from Gatineau. Her name is Christy Leblanc. So yeah, a project that's being pushed into production, and Netflix already has set a 2021 play date for this. So yeah, let's talk about O2 and the lead figure and sort of like delve into the story and the filmmaker.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, this is by Alexandre Aja, who, for me, is a filmmaker who, for me, at least from my perspective, has peaked with High Tension. That still is probably his biggest claim to fame. That was 2003. And since then, he's largely stayed in the genre space. But the efforts have been pulpier, it seems, as his career has gone on. He did the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, but more recently, he's probably known for Piranha 3D and last year's Crawl, which had its supporters among critics.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a filmmaker that's very, very genre-driven, and has yet to sort of match where he was with High Tension. But I think O2 might give him that chance. He's working with Melanie Laurent, who is as much doing her own filmmaking right now as she is acting. So it's an interesting choice for the lead. Anne Hathaway, as you said, was supposed to star originally. But the thing that interests me about this story is the contained nature of it. It's about a woman who wakes up essentially inside of a box in a medical cryogenics unit, and doesn't remember how she got there, and she's running out of oxygen. So my immediate thought was, it sounds very, very similar to Buried, that Ryan Reynolds film,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 5-6 years ago. So I'm not surprised to hear that Netflix has put mid-2021 date. This sounds like it'll be a very contained story, probably not too many settings, and one that'll be very, very focused on like the unique nature of the situation. But this, again, the casting is interesting. We have Melanie Laurent and also Mathieu Amalric as well as a co-star. So the star power is there, certainly. So it's on that level alone, it interests me more than maybe other directors' work would have previously.
You're absolutely correct with the concept. I was like searching around the internet a little bit, and how Christy Leblanc sort of like pitched it to the producers of this company, and they were hooked from the log line itself. And yeah, the fact that we're in COVID times is like productions. If you're going to put money towards a production, there's certain perimeters that are put into place to sort of like make things less complicated. And I think when you have a small chamber setting piece, it certainly makes things a lot easier. But I like the comparisons to Buried. I was thinking of Loke a little bit as well, where really is there's like a gadget type idea, um, and that also it also recalls of Thurman's character in the first Kill Bill, when she has to make certain sense of, okay, well, where the hell am I? I'm in a hospital bed. How do I get out of this? Why am I here? And so I sort of much prefer the Melanie Laurent casting. And going back to High Tension, I also think that's his best last work. I was okay with Horns. I believe that was at TIFF a couple of years back. But I'm thinking back to the lead actress in High Tension, sort of like um, the fair and lightweight character going up against her conditions. I think there's going to be a lot of mileage here for a smaller set piece. So yeah, certainly something that's exciting. I think it's mostly a Euro production, so I think there's also some lessons that Netflix could learn from this in terms of any of their other international shoots, specifically in the US. So something that might actually be a lot of fun come 2021.
And I could be wrong, but this is possibly Adja's first French film since High Tension.
I believe you're absolutely right. Hollywood Came Calling with High Tension, also known as Switchblade Romance. That was a massive calling card for him. I believe it was his sophomore film. And so yeah, so I think Hollywood came looking, but then he ended up attaching himself to a lot of smaller indie pieces, still within a larger horror framework. And yeah, maybe it just will be a little bit of a home base feel to scaling back in a way, but he's still supported by Netflix. Moving on, we have so there's a project that Josephine Decker's been attached to ever since I believe it was after Madeline's Madeline. She did do Shirley in between. So The Sky is Everywhere is a book to film adaptation. It's part of these YA projects. And A24 and Apple have sort of packaged this and been working on it for a little while now. And I imagine they were spending a great amount of time finding their lead. If we look back at Josephine Decker's last two features, both contain or have strong female characters. So yeah, the news this week is that she lassoed an actress that I'm not familiar with, and I don't think she's really touched film that much. So let's talk about this project under the guise of what it means to be a newbie actress in a Josephine Decker film.
So yeah, we're talking about the Sky is Everywhere.
Yes.
Based on, you're right, based on a YA novel. It's been in development for a while, and it follows a teenager working through the loss of her sister and falling in love. You know, Josephine Decker, it's been kind of incredible to watch her career. You know, Madeline's Madeline was a huge breakout for her, but for those who were paying attention, Butter on the Latch and Thou Wast Mild and Lovely were two films that sort of cinephiles picked up on when I believe they were in Berlin,
Yep.
2013, 2014. And Madeline's Madeline sort of confirmed for those people and for the audiences that discovered her through that film that she was really a filmmaker with a great, interesting voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, and Shirley cemented that this summer with which has managed to, in a time when people are watching everything and anything, it really stood out this summer, even though it largely went to video on demand. So, she's largely told stories about focused on women in unique situations, and this sounds like a story that's going to be more mainstream than anything she's done to date. But provides an upcoming actress in Grace Kaufman, who, you're right, she hasn't really worked in film and has largely just had a smattering of TV roles, a real breakout opportunity.
Yeah, for Helena Howard, it was a major breakthrough performance. It is also a major profile piece for this actress. I think everybody, after seeing Madeline in Sundance, just said she's going to be another Marvel or DC type character. Like that's how much of a huge role this was for this unknown actress. And the same will probably end up being true for Grace Kaufman, and especially if you have the A24 and the Apple people backing this project. In 2021, we could see not one, not two, not three, but four Edgar Wright projects. This week, it was announced that he might be moving on a project by Amblin, and this one has got a good kindred spirit with the cinema from way back. Kevin, Stage 13 could potentially go into production this year. He does have, I believe, 2 films in the wheelhouse. Yeah, let's talk about Stage 13.
Sure. So as we wait for Edgar Wright's delayed Last Night in Soho, which has been moved to next summer, given the pandemic. He's been busy sort of attaching himself to all kinds of projects, and Stage 13 is his latest. This has a pretty interesting pedigree. It's written by Simon Rich, who's a longtime Saturday Night Live writer. And the premise is super interesting. It's about the ghost of a silent film actress who's been haunting a soundstage, at a studio for years, and a struggling director meets this apparition, and together they form a friendship, and I guess decide to make their mark on the world. It might seem like a bit of an odd premise, but for me, for anyone who follows Edgar Wright on social media, he is a huge cinephile, and I think the opportunity to tell a genre story that touches on the silent film era is probably one that's really, really exciting for him.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a filmmaker now, and now, of course, I forget his name. The one that did Barbarian Sound Studio.
Peter Strickland.
Yeah, Peter Strickland. So I think there's sort of an interest here in terms of the process. I'm thinking also back to some like fun Hitch films from the 30s, and some of Hollywood's screwball comedies of the 40s. This is, I think, something of a different pace for this filmmaker. Certainly not something that that I would that we can attach to his former material. I mean, he's done so many films since like Shaun of the Dead-esque time, but it is in his wheelhouse in terms of poking fun and having characters that sort of like poke each other around. And I'm thinking of Larry Moe and Curly, but yeah, sort of like I feel as if there's some slapsticky elements here, and maybe some Mel Brooks-ish vibes to this. I'm not familiar with The Scribe, but he appears to have been something of an entity as of late. So this this story is part of a collection of stories that he put out in 2019 called Hits and Misses. Um, and yeah, when I was looking at this, I was thinking, is this the right material for Wright? And I would agree with you. He is a fan of cinema, and I think every serious filmmaker ends up making a film about filmmaking. I'm thinking of Truffaut. I'm thinking of yeah, some of the the better ones like Fellini, and nothing comes to mind of any
Well,
recent filmmakers.
even this year, David Fincher will have Mank.
Yeah,
Every filmmaker I think wants to investigate the world that they love so much, and I think this is a chance for Edgar Wright to do it. Um, so yeah, it's easy to see why he's interested in this, and just to circle back to Simon Rich, he he's a name that you probably are going to recognize on the credits for An American Pickle that's coming up. He is the writer and producer of that film.
uh,
So he spent quite a few years on Saturday Night Live, but he is really emerging as a really unique comic voice, and having Edgar Wright take on this project is another sort of stamp on that.
and so Edgar Wright also has a competing project, I believe, set up elsewhere. I think with Universal.
Yeah,
Um,
he has a couple films. He has The Chain, which is sort of a thriller setup. I'm not sure if it's at Universal or not. Yeah, it is. I believe it's at yeah, that one's
the
at
story of a
Universal.
kidnapper kidnapping a kidnapped. It was quite complex as
As a
a
premise.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then earlier this year in the spring, he attached himself to Set My Heart to Five, which is an android love story set in the year 2054. And then, as you mentioned at the top, he has a couple projects that could be on the way in addition to Last Night in Soho. He has an untitled documentary about the band Sparks, who are writing the songs for Annette, that's coming out next year. That's really highly anticipated. So I wonder if that documentary will tie into the release of that film. And he also has an animated film called Shadows at DreamWorks, which is apparently in post, which could also come next year. So a very busy time for Edgar Wright.
Well, I think it's a good segue to our next filmmaker, who is the type of filmmaker that could put out 3 to 4 films in a given year, and that's Werner Herzog. This week was announced that a doc film that sort of belongs to the same world, or it might be part of a thematic trilogy, or at least a backdrop trilogy, with encounters at the end of the world and into the inferno. Um, so Apple's getting behind his next docu feature, which is Fireball, and this, of course, is a co-directed project with Professor Clive Oppenheimer. I tend to look at, whenever there's a pickup, I look at the upcoming film festivals and how that sort of like plays into the the public launch of a said entity, and so that was the first thought that I had. I said, oh, this could potentially be announced during TIFF, because the last 2 projects that I just mentioned were also featured at TIFF. So yeah, are you still interested in this um, godly voice narration and also subject matter on Herzog's part?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Werner Herzog. I'll always be interested in what he's doing. His most recent film, Family Romance LLC, I actually really enjoyed. It's not top tier Herzog, but it's worth seeing. It's really kind of fascinating. and touches on a lot of the themes that he's investigated over his career. But back to Fireball, again, this is, as you mentioned, this is territory he's been in before. This is a film that's going to be about astronomy, so shooting stars and meteorites, and how that affects humanity. And I think you're right. I think the film is completed. So I think this is a shoe-in for being mentioned on Telluride's selection list whenever that comes out. I think had the festival gone forward, I would almost put it as a lock for showing up there. And you're right. It could be very much in the TIFF lineup. And Apple is really in busy in acquisition mode. They want to drive people to the service. And I will not be surprised if we see it on Apple TV by the end of this year. I think you're right. I think it'll be in some fall festival lineup in some shape or form, and then be quickly rolled out onto their platform.
Yeah, the Apple appears to be taking a page from Neon's playbook, and Neon is also heavily invested in the acquisition of docu items. They don't necessarily package them beforehand, I don't believe. And it's about adhering to their numbers, their audience. And Herzog is just one of those names. I think of Earl Morris all the time as well. I tend to mix up the two, which makes no sense because they're very much different entities, but they are just putting out a lot of docufilms, maybe not Alex Gibney level, but I like Herzog's interest in how he'll move to these sort of like, matching Earth and philosophical reflections or questions, and I tend to think of Terrence Malick in the same scope, is like, where are we? What is this? And he goes into some deep, profound questioning about what's around us. And so I think this is like you said, if it was a normal year for Telluride, this was a lock. And perhaps a TIFF showing, if it might be in one of those 50 selections. And Fireball is something to look forward to. And during these COVID times, when we're looking above and thinking about what our place is on this planet, I think this will look beyond that. And another indie filmmaker who's sort of in the last decade is moving along that an ascension towards projects that are perhaps a lot more, have a little bit more coin, is Patrick Brice. Patrick is part of a smaller nucleus and among the LA set filmmakers. We know him for his collaborations with the Duplass brothers, who sort of like brought him under their wings. Well, this week, HBO Max is getting behind another book-to-film project for the filmmaker. And again, it belongs to the larger horror world. So let's dig more into Patrick Brice's next project called The Wild.
Sure. So Patrick Brice, he broke out essentially with this sort of indie horror franchise of The Creep, which he worked closely with Mark Duplass on those films. And then he's directed episodes of the Duplass-produced series Room 104. But I think this project probably marks... He's done a couple other films in between. He did The Overnight, which was sort of a low-budget sort of rom-com. And then he did, well, not really a rom-com, but kind of relationship comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did Corporate Animals, which is sort of a black comedy horror vibe, which really didn't... It played at Sundance, but really did not go much further than there. But I think this HBO Max project represents his biggest breakout opportunity yet. It keeps him in genre territory where he's probably done, in horror territory where he's probably done his best work. And it gives him a unique setting to work with. If the story follows a young woman who's sort of made a lot of bad choices. Her parents send her off to a wilderness boot camp where she meets other people like her. But the twist is that something happens in the woods that none of them have expected. And so that's where the sort of horror and suspense thrills come in. So I think it's a stepping stone project for this filmmaker. And on a platform that's going to give him probably his biggest audience yet.
So worth noting is that since Corporate Animals and before this project goes into production, he'll have completed something that he filmed in Vancouver, I believe, early last year, and that's There's Something Inside Your House, and which is once again a book to film project, and once again features a teenage girl setting, and that one it reminds me of Brick a little bit, the Joseph Levitt indie star with by Ryan Johnson several years back. And this one's about a girl and a series of murders that occur in a high school. So yeah, for Patrick Brice, it's an important. I'd say it's an important two-stepper in his case. The source material for this is written by Owen Laukkanen. I'm not sure if he's Finnish. He sounds Finnish, but yeah, it appears that that the studios have taken notice of Patrick Brice and all his work, and yeah, he tends to move between gag humor and like overt horror. Wouldn't necessarily be something that we find here, but I'm curious to see if this project might harken back to maybe some 1980s horror, like Friday the 13th or something. Again, I didn't read too much into this project, but perhaps that's the direction that we might find ourselves in, especially if the project is it's a mid-level 5 to 10 to 15 million range.
Yeah, you're right. That's an interesting point. What kind of scale he'll be given to work with. And it's good to mention the Netflix project. That's completely slipped my mind. So it sounds like he's on the ascent, but still playing in territory that is very comfortable for him. But to have maybe the resources that Netflix or HBO Max have at their disposal, it'll be interesting to see what he does with that sort of access and if he expands his sort of cinematic palette a bit.
Yeah, certainly the craft services on these two films might actually be in the same ballpark as the entire production for Creep. So he's definitely going up there in terms of larger and more significant projects. And we'll end with another indie filmmaker who I remember a time when you'd give Megan Ellison from Annapurna a call and she'd just be on board. It's not the case today, or it doesn't appear to be the case for Paul Thomas Anderson. So pre-COVID, there was talk of him going into production, and focus features were essentially the ones that were going into another partnership with the filmmaker, and it appears that they're perhaps not bailing from this project, but MGM is coming on board, and I believe that's been confirmed. I think there was early talk late last week that they might come on board, but I think it's confirmed now. So yeah, San Fernando Valley, fourth feature, MGM. What sense can we make out of everything that's happening right now?
So this is an interesting one because the trades sort of updated their stories a couple times since this news hit. But originally, Paul Thomas Anderson's 70 set film was scheduled with Focus Features. Now it's at MGM, and the original story was that the move was due to budget concerns, that Focus Features wasn't comfortable with handling the budget for this film, which was apparently larger than his past pictures, hence MGM stepping in. Now the story is that the only reason for the move is because Anderson wants to start production soon, and I guess Focus Features can't facilitate that. That's the part that doesn't quite make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the final wrinkle in all of this is that Universal, which is a parent company of Focus, often distributes MGM films internationally. So at the end of the day, they're probably all still working together. But I think I just think it's interesting that, you know, Paul Thomas Anderson, I don't think he's had a film at a major studio since 2002's Punch Drunk Love, which was at Sony. Ever since then, he's either been with the Weinsteins. Actually, There Will Be Blood was Paramount. Actually, I'll take that back. It was
Paramount Vantage.
Paramount Vantage. But yeah, but since There Will Be Blood, which was 2007, so still, 13 years ago. But yeah, since then, he's either been with the Weinsteins, or with other smaller shingles. Phantom Thread was Focus. So it's just interesting to see this auteur who sort of carved his own path, sort of part of the Hollywood machine, I guess. Again, but I don't think there's any doubt that he'll be doing his own thing, no matter who's going to be putting this movie out.
Yeah, it's a little bit odd because Focus, as we know, even during the COVID times, have been attaching themselves to a lot of projects and have been spending. I think they're trying to correct the path for just their future output and like get into the prestige auteur titles once again. So I don't think it's a question of having cold feet, but perhaps MGM is just a perfect partner to like make things happen now. And if you are shooting in a high school-esque pick, high school is the fall season, and perhaps, I don't know, perhaps the narrative takes place during the summer, so perhaps there's just less leeway in terms of that backdrop. I was thinking a lot about the dwellings and the settings of the San Fernando Valley Quartet. Boogie Nights took place in a backdrop, obviously 70s, 80s, but you got a sense that these were people that were a little bit well off and belonged to a certain, an upper echelon class set. Magnolia, the fun about that is it brings you to like small apartment complexes and like dungy, places where you would buy TV sets and like, working class San Fernando Valley, I think is well represented there. And then Punch Drunk Love, you have that industrial setting as well. I'm thinking a lot of the scenes that take place in Adam Sandler's workplace. So I'm trying to like imagine what this film will look like and sort of like how it belongs to a larger tapestry. And I believe this is also set in a timeline that exists maybe in the late 70s, early 80s. Maybe I'm just BSing here, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how he appropriates a space, and perhaps the budget might have increased just because of those set pieces. And whenever you place a film during a specific setting and you do long tracking shots and whatnot, well, you have to have a lot of those visual variables in place. And I think Phantom Thread was such a contained piece, smaller settings, that here it'll expand and it'll be on a much more larger canvas. So I think there's a lot of economical reasons, and I don't think I don't think focus was shoo-shooed outside the door.
No, yeah, you're right, and I think you bring up a really good point, which is um, the this as a period setting. It does require money, and given that what we do know about this film is that aside from being set in the 70s, it does focus on a high school student who is also a child actor. There's probably elements of maybe recreating whatever TV shows
Mm-hmm.
or movies that this character will be involved with. And I would imagine that maybe some of the budget is also to get even just something simple as buying soundtrack rights for various songs from the era. And you brought up another interesting point too, which is if this is focused on a high school student, now's the time of year to shoot, preferably before schools possibly reopen, but who knows how that's going to go anywhere in the States. But the opportunity is there because right now there's no one in these facilities, and maybe Anderson can get better access. So well, no matter what, it seems he's really keen to get this rolling as soon as he can, which means we're probably not too far away from hearing some casting news about who his lead character is going to be, who's going to be in support, what regular collaborators will be back for this film, and what kind of roles they'll have. So certainly there's a lot to look forward to, because I think we'll see those kind of announcements and possibly in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, good points. Yeah, there's going to be a larger character set to this, a lot of supporting players. Maybe the nucleus, or like, it won't be as packed as, say, maybe James Gray's upcoming film Armageddon Time, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of set pieces, and yeah, with schools out right now, so you just can't recreate the hallway setting. It has to already exist. So most likely this will just top among all of the American indie offerings for next year. This is probably at the top of my list. So I think we'll be looking forward to a lot of the casting news, and a lot of paparazzi exterior shots, whatnot, and just try to sink our teeth into an MGM project. That's it for this episode. Next week, we're going to be doing a special episode where we look at the 2020 Venice Film Festival selections, which is a big deal for us armchair critics or film fans, and very much looking forward to all the Euro editions, but also, will there be any American films selected, and how does that inform what gets accepted at Telluride or TIFF? I think it's going to be a fun, a longer version episode. So thanks again, Kevin.
Always a pleasure.
Take care, folks.
I'm Eric Lavallée. I'm editor-in-chief and site owner for IONCINEMA.com. And this is
Kevin Jagernauth, contributing writer for the playlist.
And together we are IndieSponge.